Welcome along to episode 21. I'm Cam. I'm the host of the Lifting Life podcast. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. I'm a personal trainer and I also work in IT. Now today I'm pretty excited because it is the first episode here in the UK after we moved over from New Zealand. And I have a guy on who I've been following for, probably a few years. And that's Bob Waterhouse, or if you follow him on Instagram, you would know him as Bob Waterhouse, as I did, basically until I met him. Now, Bob, he is an IFBB Pro in Classic Physique, but not only that, he turned pro as a natural athlete. So if you don't know bodybuilding, what that means is that he turned pro in a federation that's untested. So honestly, I would say that's basically unheard of and near impossible. It's probably been done before, I'm sure it has, but very few times, and it's a very, very big achievement. As you can imagine, we chat about all things diet, training, and competing in this episode, and there's lots of very practical advice for those of you who don't compete, but you're wanting to put on muscle, lose some body fat, and do it naturally. We, of course, also delve into Bob's journey with his competing, because he's been competing since 2008, so he's got a lot of experience when it comes to stepping on stage. Now, for unforeseen circumstances, I'll describe it like that, we had to record this episode in my apartment, in the dining room / kitchen. So I've done my best to make the audio sound as clean as I can. Now, as always, I hope you enjoy the episode. If you do want to show support, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, or follow on the platform that you're listening to this on. Thanks. Try not to play footsies with you.
That's it.
Okay. That's recording. I think we're good to go, man.
Cool.
I think the first thing I want to say to you is just thanks so much for making the effort to come here.
No worries.
It's really cool for the first episode in the UK to actually be in person, especially with someone like you who I've been following for probably a couple of years. I remember when you turned pro in the IFBB, so I've been following you for a couple of years.
Thank you.
So.
No, it's nice. So just to start a line first today, because I had a client competing over in Wigan today, which is like 25, 30 minutes away. And obviously he wanted to go get the compulsory post-workout or post-show burger. So I treated him to a burger, and then you were like 20 minutes away. So it just couldn't have worked out any better, really.
I was laughing so hard at our messages because obviously we've been going back and forth and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to be in Wigan that weekend. I had no idea where that was. So I was like,
maybe another time. I was like, no, literally down the road from you.
And then I looked it up on Google Maps. I was like, oh shit, that's actually real close. But
so yeah,
it's really good to have you here.
But yeah, thank you for having me anyway. It's always nice to come on and do. I think it's my first podcast face to face as well. So I always tend to be online. I'm always all over the place. So
yeah, and that one that you did, because I've watched a few of your recent ones, but that one that you did with Fuad a couple of years ago, that's
2020 now. Yeah, it's flown by. Yeah.
Because we used to, on our commute to work, we used to listen to those episodes most days.
Yeah.
Or if I was doing cardio or something, I'd listen to those. So to see that you were actually on
it's
that.
Mad. I mean, he actually messaged me on Instagram as I was watching one of his episodes and was like, heard you just won your pro card. Did you want to come on the show? I was like, absolutely, yes. Right. So, and that's obviously, since then, it's all just been a really nice upwards trajectory, so to speak. So, yeah, it's good.
Anyway, we should probably jump into it. Obviously, you're a bodybuilder, been bodybuilding since about 2008.
Yeah.
So where I wanted to start with this episode is I just really want to get an understanding of what motivated you to pursue such a difficult and extreme sport right from the beginning. What was it that pulled you in?
Sure. So, I was always a competitive athlete in school days. So I did... I was at professional football clubs, or soccer clubs, as some of you might call it. I got released when I was, I believe, 16. So they had like 23 like schoolboys, if you like, who obviously would go on to get a scholarship, and they only took 2 on out of them 23. So basically it was kind of I was kept on right to the last minute. They got rid of all the other 20, and there was basically 4 of us left or so. And they then basically sort of made the call and said, we're really sorry, but we're not going to be taking you on. So I then went and trialled at a couple of other pro clubs, didn't get contracts there, played semi-pro for a year, didn't like that, just getting kick lumps out of and things like that. And I just sort of felt, I mean, I was kind of one of these people who was like all eggs in one basket for football. You know, didn't particularly try super hard at school because I was like, well, I'm just going to be a professional football player. That was my mentality. I'm not sure where that is.
That's Chloe's spare phone.
She might just turn off.
Oh yeah, so I was, as I said, played semi-pro for a year, didn't like it, and I really fell out of love with kind of like football side of things. At the time, I had been going through like numerous like hamstring injuries, and I was spending more time in the gym. My dad and my brother had always had like a good weight set up in the garage, and I was too young to do it effectively. So the first opportunity I could do was always wanting to do a bit of weight training.
So that was an older brother?
My older brother, yeah. So basically I feel like what kind of threw me into it really was, I obviously always loved the idea of kind of being able to put on muscle mass. Like I was always, as a kid, drawn to the comics, even like Spider-Man or whatever, where they obviously would draw them all jacked.
Yeah.
Be like, I was just like, I was always fascinated with that. And all the sort of like the Weeder manuals that my dad had, which was all the exercise guides and things like that. You know, they always drew these sort of anatomy charts, all really big and muscly, with small, tiny waists and massive arms and pecs.
So they're the ones that you would see on the wall in old school
exactly,
gyms?
Yeah, like just like the demonstrations on the exercise that people might see on the actual gym machines. It's just sort of like massive guys with like, you know, cool little tiny waists. And basically, yeah, I had been sort of dabbling with doing some weight training because it was like kind of the lower level, the lower leagues of professional football football in general. You tended to always need to be bigger and stronger. So that was kind of one of the things, like, well, you need to be stronger. So basically we do some kind of weight resistance training alongside with that.
Because it is surprisingly physical, football.
It is, yeah, it is. And this is, you know, having that sort of core strength on the ball and all that kind of stuff. And I was always quite a strong kid anyway. I would play for the year above and always kind of be really good. And, you know, the sprinting side of things and the tackling side of things was always just like a really good, you know, just a good, I guess, a good attribute for me, really. And basically what happened was I then kind of, you know, got released from football, and I was always doing athletics at the time as well. And I saw that dwindled out, was a national level sprinter. So I always had a really sort of competitive side in me anyway. And obviously with team sports and things like that, it was always kind of like, you know, you always had, it wasn't just an individual thing. But I think that it was kind of the missing void I was looking for. And I don't think it was initially like competitive bodybuilding that I wanted to get into. I was just kind of fascinated with the fact of like, I wanted to be bigger. You know, you're the same old sort of cliche stories that you feel like, oh, well, like, look how many girls are going to like want me because I've got massive arms.
I was going to ask, do you think it came from an insecurity thing? Or
No, not all, no. I was a very confident kid. I mean, I had a six-pack when I was 9. Do you know what I mean? I just those good genetics for bodybuilding.
Always been the muscly kid.
I always was, yeah, never an inch of fat on me. You know, was always just kind of like lean all the time because obviously just did so much activity. And I feel like, I said, basically like joined a gym when I was 14 and went with my brother. And obviously that was obviously while still playing football and athletics and everything. And then obviously then when I sort of got released from football contracts, that was my next outlet, was to go to the gym more. And then it was like the typical lads holidays are coming up. They're not so much stag do's, but you know, you go away with like Ibiza or whatever. And it was kind of like wanting to be in shape for those kind of things. So I did my first cut in like 2005 or something.
And what did that look like?
I actually looked all right. Yeah, it looked all right. It's like the first time I'd been in shape in years because I went through a phase of trying to bulk and it was just got fatter and fatter basically. So it was the first time I kind of had abs again. And it was like, oh, like, you know, this actually looks pretty cool.
Did you follow anything specific?
Yeah, well, no, a very, very low carb diet, hardly eating, and just basically just kind of like, I guess, good genetics for that side of things. I like a 6-week cut and like managed to get like a bit of a 6-pack. And I guess from that point onwards, it was obviously then I wanted to work in a gym. So obviously I was training at the gym that I joined there. And then obviously I became friendly with the owner there. And he was like, maybe you could come and do a Sunday shift for us. This must have been when I was about 18 or so. or 17, 18. And then the rest was kind of history from there. So I basically was kind of just, wanting to put on muscle mass, really. And it just so happened to be a guy who's a good friend of ours. His name was Jimmy. He used to train at one of the hardcore bodybuilding gyms down the road in Oxford. We're in Abingdon, so it's like 20 minutes away. And he was like, you guys should do like a natural bodybuilding show. And I was kind of like, I didn't even know that existed. And he's like, you'd be quite good at it because, you both kind of like got a good level of muscle mass for, people your age kind of thing. And it was like, why don't you try and do that? And he took us to, he basically suggested to go to a show, and my actual boss at the time now, who's owns the marketing companies, and MyZone. I'm not sure if you've heard of MyZone before.
Is that
the heart rate monitor?
Oh, yeah.
That's
right.
huge. So he owns that company. So he took me to my very first bodybuilding show, and a walk through and was kind of like, there's no way these guys are natural. Like, it's not possible. But then as soon as I saw like the junior class, I was like, I could do that. And I was hooked from that moment on. So basically, the guy did our diet for us, and then the following year I competed in the Scottish show, which was in June. So that was all within a turnaround of about 6-8 months or so. So and then I was bitten by the bug well and truly from that very first point on, from doing my first show. So
it's interesting to hear that were quite familiar at competing at a high level already. So it's obvious that there was some sort of...
It was definitely a void. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was like something that's like missing, where you've been in competitive sports all your life and now you're not doing anything. And it's like, you're not doing that compulsory 5 sessions of physical education per week. And, after school clubs, I went from doing so much. I mean, I played football probably 3 times a week. I did athletics twice a week. I went to the gym. So it's like, I didn't ever sit still as a kid. I was always doing something. Then all of a sudden went from all that, no contracts, give up athletics. And it's like, I was doing nothing but going to the gym. So it was kind of like, well, I need some sort of way to channel this, rather than just like, it's not enough just to kind of like want to look good. Well, for me, it wasn't. It was kind of like, something's kind of missing there. And I enjoyed that process of just kind of going to the gym and learning more about diet and nutrition and learning about training. But it was kind of like, as soon as I went to that show, I was like, 100% that's what I want to do. I want to be a bodybuilder. So.
And how did you find that contrast between like competing in a team at a high level versus you started pursuing an individual sport and now it's all on you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm definitely more comfortable in an individual environment, to be honest. And it was not like, your teammates let you down. It was just that, like, I was at, like, really kind of, like, amateur soccer level. I was always leaps and bounds ahead of everyone at my age. So I was quicker, stronger, faster, probably better ball skills. When I went to professional clubs, I was one of the worst players, I feel, in my mind. And I was probably still the quickest on the team and one of the strongest, but, I didn't have that sort of like the skills that I would needed to compared to a lot of the other people. And I was very much that, not my confidence a lot. And I was very much a person who was kind of hit or miss when I played. I would either have a stormer or I'd be absolutely terrible. First touch was terrible. We couldn't do anything right. And just like my football just like went on a massive decline, where I weren't improving. And I sort of look back at that now, and it was that level of anxiety that I used to get. It was almost like, I don't want the ball to come to me kind of thing. Yeah. And I never had that as a kid when I was playing at like, where you're just better than just your confidence was so good. So and that really ruined my kind of experience with football. It was kind of like where I just kind of couldn't cope with that team pressure. I don't know. But let's say for me, it's like, it's all on my shoulders. So I'm sort of quite a confident person in general, but I feel like I was just like always at my lowest confidence when I was playing like team sport. So,
and I feel like your personality to succeed in bodybuilding, you have to thrive off everything being placed on you.
Yes, yeah, and I feel like it is that to a certain point, but you're also kind of you sort of learn to, and it's not like a sort of like a selfish side of things, but you want to better yourself, and obviously said you're not in control of that with a lot of team sports, and it was very much like a self-improvement journey, if you like, and it was like kind of like sort of seeing what was possible. And obviously I had a very good experience of weight training because my body took to weight training very, very well. So I would love to know in kind of pounds what I actually put on in muscle mass. I mean, I developed stretch marks in my legs and around my arms, around my chest quite quickly. And obviously I'd put on some body fat as well, but I could see I literally just started squatting and on my legs ballooned.
It shows how fast your body was adapting.
Which I wish was the case now. The legs seem to have gone the other way now. But yeah, so it was like, I was like all of a sudden like put on a load of muscle mass and got bigger like quite quickly. So it was like, this is great, so it was quite a nice experience to start off with. It definitely wasn't a hard
Boost the confidence a little bit.
Yeah, exactly that, yeah.
So from 2008, what did your career sort of in competing look like from there?
So, I mean, this is, I was very spoiled, let's just say that, because I think luck of the draw, good genetics for bodybuilding. So 2008, I wanted to do my first show. That sole decision was made on the basis that I wanted to go to Ibiza.
Oh, yeah.
So
very deep, sort of meaningful reason.
So basically, what happened was, obviously, we were at that age. I must have been 22, where we'd been on a couple of lads' holidays, and everyone wanted to go on holiday in like June time. And for me, doing my first show in like August, September, it's impossible to do a show before that. So the only show I could do was the Scottish qualifier, which is like the furthest away you could go in the UK to go and do a bodybuilding show if you live
all the way up north.
Yeah. So like, we took a minibus. It took us like 15 hours on a minibus because it was like, a group full of people.
Yeah.
But basically, I did that show so I could go on holiday with the boys and then basically do the British finals afterwards. But I walked into my first show. There was only 2 other guys in the show as a junior. It's the year they raised the junior age group. So I was at 22 and they was previously under 21. So then at that age, it makes a massive difference in development from like your 19s to your 22s, 23s. You're starting to get your bones are starting to harden off and you're starting to, mature better. And, I walked into that show, won by an absolute sort of like, country mile, and then went on to the Britain that year and won pretty convincingly at that as well. So my first year of bodybuilding was like, you've won, you're Mr. Scotland and you're now Mr. Britain.
And what did that do for your ego, do you think? I feel like that's a good thing in the short term, but could be very detrimental in the long term.
I paid the price hard, actually, because the year after that, I came into the Mr. classes. And I played the size game where I was like, right, well, I'm competing in the men's leagues now, so like I've got to be bigger and bigger and bigger. And I came into that show and was very humbled. I placed 4th out of 4.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was too fat. Simple as that. I was way off stage conditioning. I was kind of feeling like, right, I need to be bigger, bigger, bigger. And it's like, remember, my dad filmed that show from the back row of the auditorium. And in the lineup, you could see I was the biggest guy there, but I was up close, the fattest there. So that year, I was kind of like, so I went and had a off-plan meal that night. And I took one bite of a Chinese meal and was like, I don't even deserve this. Like, I've not achieved anything. Usually your reward after a show of having a nice bit of food, some people will drown the sorrows in it or whatever, but it was like, I kind of pushed a plate away and was like, that's not me, that, I don't come 4th out of 4 for the show.
Don't deserve the gratification.
Exactly, yeah. So I then went on to compete in the, I was competing in the middleweights at that time. I then went on 3 weeks or 4 weeks later, I did another qualifier. I came second in that and qualified for the finals. I then came down a whole weight class by the Britain, so I dropped about another 18 pounds. So that goes to show.
And was that mostly just body fat?
Oh yeah, it was all body fat. Like I was peeled by the time I got to lightweights, and I took second in the lightweight Britain. So obviously that was, and I just missed out that year on turning pro because they gave the lightweight, middleweight, and heavyweight winners and the overall winners pro cards that year. It's the 10th year anniversary, so it's the only time I've ever done that.
Was that is that DFAC?
It's BMBF. The DFAC is the pro fed in that.
Oh, so that's when you turn pro there.
Yeah, so obviously, I came second in that show. The guy who turned pro is one of my best friends now in bodybuilding. I actually prep him now for his shows. So he won the pro card. He wanted to do the pro show, and they then took me to Worlds in 2009 to Washington to compete in my first World show.
How did that feel going overseas to compete?
That was horrible. I mean, I won't talk bad about the other federations because there is a bit of a mixed bag with natural shows. But as far as I'm aware, the reason why we parted ways with the federation at the time, who was the if you like, when you're an amateur, you then have a pro affiliate that you're with. So that's why they set up the DFAC, because they were sick and tired of all the other ones not drug testing properly, not doing what they should do properly. And basically their drug testing, basically for what you were allowed and wasn't allowed to take, pro hormones weren't banned on the list. Oh, wow. So in the BMBF there was, and they weren't on there. So it was like, well, I competed in a height class, and I was 70 kilos on the button. The guy who won my show was 102 kilos at the same height. 32 kgs. So they basically had a parting of ways, shall we say, because of that side of things. And then basically, 2010, I was like, right, well, the main guy who's won the lightweights now was turned pro, so the lightweight title's mine. And then some freak came out of nowhere and I took second again that British final. So I didn't have to qualify for that British final because I'd done Worlds. And then I took from 2010 off to 2013, where I had the kind of biggest off season of my life, where I got to about 110 kilos in not good shape.
Oh, mind. Yeah, nice.
So that was like the monster cut of monster cuts. It took me, a good 11, 12 months before I was in shape. And I won the Natural Pro card in 2013. So then went on to do the pro shows out there. Took 5th in the first Worlds. And then 16 and 17, I won lightweight Worlds. So I came down from like a middle heavyweight class because I was always just that little bit over on condition where I should have been. Yeah. And I thought if I pull down hard enough, I can, do that. And obviously, took some really good names out with that, some really seasoned veteran pros.
And was your approach adapted much to competing in that pro rank, or did you stick with the same sort of approach that had been successful in
2013 is when I switched over to high carb dieting. And that really found the formula. That was the missing link that I wasn't doing, which all the other pros was. Yeah. And I kind of spoke to a couple of good friends of pros who were kind of like, right, well, you're dieting on 400 grams of protein a day and 0 carb type of thing. And you're getting in shape, right? But it's like, look, you're missing. You've sort of built a foundation. Let's build a house. That was kind of what was said to me. And I mean, it was like, say, apart from the fact that I obviously put on so much weight when I first did that, but I was like, I've been hungry and suffered to make lightweights. 2009, 2010, on 50 gram of carb a day, 2 hours of cardio a day. And I sucked down to get to that weight class where it wasn't for the better of my physique, but I made a weight class. And that's something that I think people should definitely learn. Like, you don't look better for doing that. But it was like ticking a box of like, well, I want to be the biggest lightweight, not the smallest middleweight. And I can see why people do it. But once I'd done that, once I'd actually kind of then started competing at where I should have been, I was like probably about 6-7 kilos heavier on stage by not over dieting.
That's a big difference.
It was massive, yeah.
Naturally, that's huge.
Yeah, it was, and it was also, because I used to just like say diet on next to nothing, just fish and lettuce pretty much.
So what would you say to people? This might be more lifestyle related, who are scared of carbs. I feel like that's the most commonly hated on food group.
I mean, education is definitely inside of that. I mean, I always kind of use a basic analogy really, or the kind of example. If you've got someone, and let's just take fats out of the equation, let's say you've got someone who's on 400 grams of carbs a day, 400 grams of protein a day, and you've got someone who's on 200 grams of protein and 200 grams of carbs, it's the same fucking calories. Yeah. So the difference in what that does to your physique, in your training, your mood, the way that you're able to actually like lift heavier because you actually have an abundance of energy source. And that's just obviously a really bad example with numbers wise, but it's the same calories, but the physique will look differently and you will feel differently.
Because the food types interact differently.
Because you're not trying to get protein to convert to a carbohydrate. It's a very long, we're taking the B roads to get to the destination, where it's like, look, it absolutely baffles me why so many CrossFitters are like keto. It's bonkers.
Very counterintuitive, right?
It's like, look, let's have the best. I mean, it's like carbohydrates in your body. It's kind of like wearing cargo pants. You've got carbohydrates you can store in the liver, carbohydrates you can store in the blood, in the muscle, and it's like fat. It's like the only place you can store that is your fat ass.
And it's very hard to tap into as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of like use something that is going to be able to keep the muscle really full and hard, so the muscle's pressed against the skin. You get that really nice kind of fresh round look, and you also then get an abundance to be able to train harder. and your NEAT activity stays higher because you've got energy. So it was kind of like that was the formula that I was missing. So it was kind of when I did that, that was like it was a different looking physique. And plus I'd taken, probably a good nearly sort of 20 months off or so, maybe almost 2 years, maybe 2.5 years really. So obviously changing the diet and then not over dieting and switching to a high carbohydrate. And then obviously maturing from 23 to like 25. That was another big change in kind of maturity anyway. So it kind of was all the sort of boxes ticked to be a much more improved bodybuilder.
And by having more carbs to play with at the start of your prep, I'm assuming it probably made your prep easier too because
it was an absolute breeze. Yeah. Like, I say this to people now, they're like, why? I'm 7 weeks out at the moment, like, and I've got an abundance of energy, like I feel great, like, and I'm still eating 400 or 500 grams of carbs a day now. That's a good amount of body fat, right? But the diets I did back in that 2009, 2010 was like, you get up in the morning, it was like, how am I going to make it through the day? It was like, it was a struggle. Like if we had a delivery come through at work for like a tray of waters or whatever, like, a pallet of waters, like there was no way I wanted to take them up the stairs. Like I couldn't, like, I was just like, I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know how I'm going to find the energy to do this. And that was what I felt like for about 6 to 8 weeks at the end of that prep. So like now it's like, well, nothing's nowhere near as bad as that. So like for now, it's like I could do it standing on my head. Do you know what I mean? It's still hard, but it's it's in comparison to what I've done. It's like I always remember back to that, like how I felt on a daily basis. And now I get up in the morning, like I'm absolutely buzzing to go train. I've got bags.
And when your output, so when you're having a decent amount of input, like your calories, that means that you don't have to drive the output so hard too. If your intake's at the floor, exactly. You can't take any more
you
out.
actually get a better looking physique because of that way around to do it. And this has been talked about for a lot recently. So if someone is going to do very low output and very low food, you can get a similar result. But the much better way to do it is to feed the body plenty and move plenty. You'll get a more athletic, rounder, harder look where you're kind of, as I said, you're able to train heavier simply because you have carbohydrates in your muscles. I mean, if someone can just go and do it as an experiment, it's like, go and eat, nothing but protein and go train and then go and do that a few weeks later and how much better you feel.
And that's perfect advice for even just lifestyle people.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, I have a ton of lifestyle clients and they're all still on higher carb approaches. Yeah. Obviously, if you've got someone who's kind of, very overweight, it's not important for him to be eating 400 or 500 grams of carbs. He can't do that. You have to build it up over a period of time. You don't so the mistake I made when I gained all that weight is I went from like 50 grams of carbs a day to then like 500 was a good number. And I
progressive overload.
And my kind of like, my weight gain was like I gained like 10 pounds every week for about 5 months. Yeah. And then I was about 35 kilos over stage weight. And I sat at that very quickly. Now when I get fatter in the off season, it takes me an awful long time to gain that weight. I might only gain 5 pounds after a show. And it will take me a good 9 months to actually get to the peak off season weight. So it's over a much, much shorter period. And obviously it was horrific rebounds. Your blood pressure goes through the roof, your joints hurt.
Very unhealthy.
That was horrific. So I would never recommend that. But if you think like this, if you go, right, okay, well, I'm going to clip back a little bit of protein because I go off 1 gram per lean pound. So we go off a little bit of protein back, you replace the same carbs back, it's the same calories. So then you go, okay, I'll do that again until you kind of find that tipping point with your protein. And then you just clip the carbs up. You can drop the fats back, put the food volume up with carbs. So you want to try and get your body to be as efficient as possible at using carbohydrates and not kind of an abundance of the other stuff. Because protein can do its job for growth and repair if you've got carbohydrates to run your body on.
Yeah.
And then trying to get that convert. Yeah.
And then the higher you can drive your carbs, it gives you more of a range to play with when you want to cut down.
It does. Yeah, I mean, if you start your diet at 400, like 400 or 500, like you might finish your diet on 250, 300, which is what a lot of people would start their diet at. Yeah. So it gives you, said that you're all going to end up in this hole at the end of it anyway. So it's a much more efficient way to diet, and it's actually, I've been talking to a few new clients who are over from the US, and it seems to be that very much so that a lot of the US natural pros still diet very high protein, very low carb. And they wonder why all the UK guys are like absolutely handing their ass to them in shows because it's a different diet approach. I mean, I know that, it is a mixed bag. There are some very good guys, but on the whole, it's why they have got such dense, hard, round muscle and look like they all look kind of that same sort of like dense look. And it's because of the way they diet for sure. So.
Well, that's very good advice.
Cool.
Back to where you were in your competing career. That was a nice tangent. That was something I really wanted to chat to you about, though, because I think people listening will find that really valuable.
Yeah.
Especially coming from someone like yourself.
Sure.
But I think we were.
So we got up to what, 2013, right?
2013.
Or we did, yeah. So 2017, I won Worlds was the last show I did there, and then I took 2017 off. 2018 off and 2019 off. So I had a good 2 years off there. And my goal at that point was to win the overall at a natural world title. But in doing so, there had been the introduction of Classic Physique. Now, I'd done a Classic Physique show in 2013, but it was just starting to become apparent. So in the UK, you had the IFBB Pro, which I've been to a show today. And some of the overall winners who were doing them shows weren't particularly classic. There's a few guys like John Lofthouse looked great, and he's a good pro now. And basically, like a few of them, I was like, I could look better than that. Without being big-headed. You sort of like, your own capabilities when you've been competing for a while. You kind of know.
Maybe for people who don't know bodybuilding, could you quickly explain the different categories?
Of course, yeah. So, you've kind of like you've obviously got men's bodybuilding, which would be kind of weight class. So the natural progression would be that you've got the very, very light guys at maybe bantamweight, and then you've got your super heavyweights. In a lot of natural bodybuilding shows, it tends to be just like light, middle, and heavy. But Classic Physique is based on, it should be a throwback to like the 70s era, maybe towards the 80s and very early 90s. So basically you've got not the mass monsters, but you've got like your Arnolds and your Robbie Robinsons kind of physiques where it's a very, very small waist. If you was to draw a silhouette of a bodybuilder, or like they did in the comics, that's a classic bodybuilder. So it was a case of like, look, you can't fix that stuff. Sometimes where you've got the muscle insertions and the origins of everything, where you flow in a body, you can pack as much muscle on some of them frames. And the guys who keep that very, very small waist and that nice, lovely V taper, to where it's like you could bring your nan to a show and she would go, that's a nice physique to look at, right?
That's a really good way of explaining it.
Like my mum would go to the shows when we were first starting out, and she's like, she could pick the winner every time. Because also a lot of the shape and flow guys tended to be with good enough condition, of course. So it's kind of like, what you would look at and appreciate, like that's a nice looking physique. So obviously the guys who are kind of now, more people are doing classic who are, they're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, and they're basically they're meeting a weight and height limitation with classic. But they're not very classic looking, and that's why they don't place frame
kind of look.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah, that's what we're kind of looking for. Nice sweeping quad, small waist, and a nice wide chest, and a nice, you want to look like an upside down Dorito. It's kind of like that kind of thing.
But in your bone structure, obviously, plays into that.
Yeah, and obviously, and insertions is a big one. I'm not sure if people will know what I'm talking about, but you can have, as I said, like 5 different bodies, and it's the way that like the origin insertion of your muscle, how it flows on your physique. So you can have someone who's like maybe like a Lee Priest, who's got really big, round, bubbly arms and bubbly shoulders, but his pec inserts were very high, and his lat inserts were very high. So you kind of want, like, if you look at your kind of like your, I guess, most successful Mr. Olympias, like probably like aesthetically before he sort of got too big that side, like a Phil Heath. Yeah. You've got the crazy round muscle bellies, the small waist, the big legs. And a lot of the guys from the 90s era, kind of, like your Sean Rays, your Flex Wheelers, like that's what we're kind of looking for, but as a smaller version, right, with Classic. So basically, they had the introduction to Classic Physique. I thought I could probably do quite well in that one. So it was during lockdown, so obviously they locked the country down. I'd already started a contest prep, and I was kind of like, right, I've got 2 options. I'm fat as a house now, so I either get fatter in lockdown and don't do much, or I continue on with the prep, regardless whether the show happens or not. At least I might get a nice photo shoot at the end of it, right? So kept me very structured in my routine, and basically training in my garden for around 9 months or so. I went into that show and took my class win, obviously, and that was obviously as an assisted show, not a natural show. And a overall title. So obviously I won that, and was like, deep down I sort of knew that I could do quite well, but like it was when I actually came out to do that show in my class, I was like, if I just make top 5, I'd be really happy, because everyone was massive, everyone looked really good. And then obviously then to get the favours of the call outs and then to win the British champion, I was just like, that's like that, I'm made up with that.
For people who don't know bodybuilding, that's huge. But to come in as a natty and win an assisted show and get your pro card. And that's why, like you said, Fawad reached out to you because of how sort of groundbreaking it is.
It's probably never ever going to be done in open bodybuilding, just to give people that comparison. But I say classics criteria. And you can maybe get a few men's physique guys now who, well, they have done it. They have won their pro cards natural. Because it's said, apart from obviously men's physique, it's probably going a little bit too far as size-wise. But the guys are incredible. They've still got, 28-inch, 30-inch waists and like obviously ridiculous amounts of muscle mass in the upper body. But basically, it was kind of one of those things where it was like, well, you're ticking the boxes there, and therefore, like, this is what you go do, and then obviously then winning that. As I said, like, winning the overall, it was competing against guys who were like 70 pounds heavier than I was. So they judged that on criteria. So that's why I talked about putting a square peg in a round hole. You might have someone who's got 70 pounds more muscle than you have, but they're not a better shape.
Looks like a barrel or something.
Some are not so bad with classics. A lot of guys were still fairly classic, but they were just kind of like, physique didn't flow as pretty. So that was kind of like, that's the look that they wanted. And that's why obviously it came out champ that day.
Mentally, how did that sort of change your perception of where you could go in bodybuilding? Because it would have opened up this whole other world.
I mean, it was kind of like, you really did have to pinch yourself afterwards, because it was like, it was obviously always a dream of becoming an IFBB Pro, but there was never ever any avenues to go and do that, because I said they only had open bodybuilding when I first started bodybuilding. So it was like, well, I'm not going to go and beat someone who's like 20 stone or, 225 kilo, whatever, so it was kind of one of those. So the fact that it was then obviously kind of all the stars aligned that way to go and do that, I've kind of lost my track of thought really, but basically, it was like something that I didn't think I would be able to do, and then opening that up was like, the possibilities are endless now with regards to, obviously it was very restricted in the UK. Once you turn pro naturally, you've basically got the British Grand Prix and World Finals. So if you stay with that same federation, you're competing once or twice a year. At the end of the year, it then goes, right, like if I want to go and do a show in Kazakhstan, I can go do one. If I want to go do one in Alaska, if I want to go to Hawaii, I can. So it was like, you can now go and compete anywhere in the world at the very highest level that you can go to. And like, that excited me massively. It was kind of like, right, I can go and do all these shows, and who knows how I'll do, but like, I'm a professional bodybuilder, it was kind of one of those.
Speaking from my perspective, I feel like one of the wider sort of implications or impacts that it had was me. I was following at the time. I was like, holy shit, as a natural athlete, this is something that you're able to achieve.
Yes.
I think there would have been a lot of other people like me who were kind of altered our perception too of what's attainable by pursuing it naturally.
And I definitely think like it was kind of like, I would say I've got good genetics for bodybuilding, but I was also 20 years deep into training at that point. So, a lot of guys think they can just sort of come into the sport now and sort of do that naturally. And I think that it's like, you need to have, what my kind of like threw it for me was like, shape and conditioning. So I was probably one of the hardest guys in the class as well. So at like elite level natural bodybuilding, everyone is peeled. Like you don't go to Worlds and you end up winning if you're soft. It's as simple as that. It's like if your glutes aren't in, you probably don't turn up. It's kind of one of those. So it was definitely felt like I was one of the first to do it. I think there had been other people, but it hadn't really got recognised. It was definitely the first guy in the UK. Let's put it that way anyway. And I was already quite well known, without blowing my trumpet, in the natural bodybuilding community. So, you obviously, if you've won world titles and you've beaten really good guys as well who've won multiple overall titles, and you've taken them scalps, if you like, that was kind of like, you already had a little bit of a following that way. So then that was kind of like, the next thing on of what you could physically do. So yeah.
And now that people who are listening have an understanding of your resume, which is very impressive, I want to get a bit more of an understanding or delve into, I suppose, what bodybuilding means for you. Obviously, you've been doing it for a while, and people might just see it as you're got some abs and you got some muscles and you eat some chicken and some broccoli, but there's so much more to it, especially to pursue it for such a long period of time. There must be something that's sort of under the surface that motivates you.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that really kind of took me at the start was being like, doing something so hard better than everybody else was like a massive challenge and a massive accomplishment. I mean, I would often be doing a prep towards the end of, a show, especially when I did them really horrible preps in the past. And I would tell myself, like, no one else is doing this out there. Like, no one else is able to put themselves through this. And I can, like, take pride in the fact that I was able to push myself to kind of like, very quite far and beyond where your body will take you. As obviously they say, where your mind goes, your body will follow. And I think I had a really, really good work ethic and a kind of like, maybe from coming from a competitive aspect and a very good upbringing with support, with, my football. It was kind of like, my dad was always kind of one of them people who was like, you can do anything you put your mind to kind of thing. And he sort of truly believed that. And it very much installed that from me from day one. So when kind of prep was rough and things like that, it was kind of like, I almost, to a certain point, embraced the fact that like other people weren't able to do it.
You almost get like a little bit of a kick out of it.
Yeah, it was kind of like, you're not doing this. Like, I'm going to make you pay for this. Like, I'm going to wipe the floor with you in the shows because, you're not able to do what I'm able to do. So I feel like there was a big a big like self-accomplishment in my own head that I was physically able to take my body to kind of new levels with it each time. And every single time I competed was always bigger and better. It was never worse, really. Maybe 1 year out of the 15 or so years I competed. So really for me, I mean, I've been speaking to people about this a lot recently, but I am one of them people who, picked up a weight at 14, and I have never once lost any passion for bodybuilding. I am one of these guys who, yes, I live and breathe it, and yes, I have a life outside bodybuilding. Lots of my friends and all that kind of stuff. I have a lot of friends who don't bodybuild, don't even train. And there's the whole different side. Now, we don't even talk about bodybuilding. It just, they know that I do it. But for me, it's like, I've got like clients and stuff who are like, wanting to do their last shows. They've had enough of bodybuilding. They've got, got to a certain point and don't really interest them anymore. Like, I've never had a day where I woke up and thought, I don't think I want to bodybuild anymore. Like, ever. So, like, for me now at like, 37, like the fire is still really burning in me. And I'm kind of just like, I love it so much every day. And it's not even like I love getting up and eating my chicken and potatoes. It's not that. It's more, I think, the fact of like the journey of being able to kind of like to reach new levels of what's physically possible for your own body, I think. And that was kind of, that's what excites me. It's like, how much better can I get by doing everything perfect?
And it seems that because it's such a you versus you sort of mentality, that's probably what's helped you be able to do it for so long. Of
course, yeah. And it's just like, it excites me every day still. Yeah. Like there's honestly nothing else in this world that I think that excites me like bodybuilding does. And it said, yes, it's on a geeky level for sure. But it's like I said, it's not that I just sort of, love sitting by myself eating my chicken and rice. It's not that. I mean, it's very opposite for kind of what I'm like as a person and relationships and all that kind of stuff. I sort of, have a very nice life balance for bodybuilding. That's, I think, very, very different. And something that my boss had said to me recently is like, they've taken on other bodybuilders to do the sales and marketing job they've done, and every single one of them have been terrible at it because they get into a prep and they can't function. All they can do is bodybuild. Whereas for me, it was like, you're just an anomaly. Like, you still have, most people wouldn't know if they met me, like, at a show or whatever. They're like, hey, you getting ready for a show? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like 6 weeks out. They're like, you're not a zombie. What's going on? Yeah. So it was like that kind of level of kind of just that excitement for it.
And do you think that's because some people compete almost out of obligation, or they just feel like it's something that they have to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely in this day and age, it's kind of people want the gratification for it. Instagram has made that very popular.
I was going to say, it's an interesting thing about your journey, because that time, especially in the first like 5 or so years, you got into it at a time where social media
Yeah,
wasn't like
Facebook
even a
had
thing.
just come about.
Yeah.
So where Instagram was like, I couldn't even get on with Instagram when it first started out. I was like, what's this? This is weird.
And going to the gym would have been such a niche thing to do it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I had there's a comment from one of my best friends, and it was when I was 16. I used to go and use the multi-gym at school in the lunch break. So obviously I'd do all my sports activities, and then I'd go and train at lunchtime when everyone would sit around in the classrooms eating the lunch or whatever and eating crisps. And I'd be training, and he was like, I don't understand why you're doing this now. You've got the rest of your life to do this. And my kind of thought mentality was, yeah, but by the time I'm like 25, I'll be in like great shape. And that was
10 years ahead of everyone.
Exactly. And I was like, this is my head start. And I feel like that was kind of like, my whole mentality towards it was kind of, and as I said, I had such good progression at a young age. Like I could see like weekly to monthly changes at that point. So it was very motivating to be seeing like I'm filling out my school shirt more. I feel stronger. Like my weights are improving in the gym, and like my physique started to look better and better and better. And I said that was probably more of like I guess we could call that a hyper responder at that age, but it was kind of just my body was waiting to do that. And then it was like, I probably did the first 5 years of bodybuilding with not knowing what I was doing dieting wise. It was all guesswork. And it's like, I look back now, I'll be like, how did you diet like that? But I made really fast progress still. And then when I then did find the formula with dieting, it's like I then had this another growth spurt. So that's why it's kind of like, it's like a sort of, the people who are maximizing all the variables now, let's say between like 18 to 25, and they're not a good bodybuilder yet, and they're maximizing. So they're going to bed at 10 o'clock every night. They're eating all their meals. They're doing everything perfectly. The training execution's perfect. Their intensity's perfect. And they're a very small bodybuilder still. They are probably never going to be able to progress to the levels of like a natural IFBB Pro.
Their genetic ceiling is just
exactly
so much lower,
Because I say for me, it was kind of like, I was eating well Monday to Friday and going out with the boys on the piss at the weekend. For the first 4 years of bodybuilding. And then obviously for a prep, I was, obviously I would never cheat on my diet or anything, or never drink. But in the off season, like, I was like eat well Monday to Friday, just go out and eat twice at a weekend, like have an English breakfast, and then like go out for steak, and then I'd go drink the rest of the night.
And you're still
packing on muscle. I was still making huge progress. So it's kind of like, I wasn't even doing everything that I needed to do to be better. It was kind of like I was just like finding my feet and making progress. So
this is something I wanted to pick your brain on. So we're already here in terms of muscle gain.
Of course.
There's bound to be people listening right now who want to put on muscle, who are natty. What are some of the things that you've done throughout your time that have just been proven methods for you to put on muscle?
Couple of different areas. One is training. I think regardless, this day and age, it's very, very popular of execution is key, right? So yes, there is kind of somewhere in the line where I'm kind of like, I'm a bit bro, and I'm a little bit sciencey, I'm somewhere in the middle.
It's like execution versus intensity.
Yes. So my thing was like, I just used to go and train balls to the wall. Like, it might have been a very swingy lat pull down. It might have been a very bouncy bench press off the chest, and that's the things that you learn as you get older and you train more, is that like loads and stuff that I used when I was 22. Let's say I was able to bench, 315, for example. It wasn't as heavy as that, but let's say it was that.
Which is 140 kilos, right?
Yes, 140
three
kilos.
plates.
Yeah, so 2.5 plates is what I could always do when I was like 22. The way that I'm able to use that load now at 37 is like complete. I'd love to go back and see a video of me bouncing that off my chest, but I could physically move the weight. But you learn to be able to move everything better, and you get a better connection within the muscle. And it's something that, I probably didn't have a good connection in my back when I was training for the first 10 years of bodybuilding. That's why my back was always so undeveloped. And it's like, it's taken me this long to actually start getting better at that stuff. And that's obviously, we're talking 15, 20 years in. But I think there's so much emphasis now on having perfect form.
Optimal training.
Yes, that the actual problem is that your meat and potatoes of like doing heavy barbell rows and heavy deadlifts and heavy one-arm rows, that kind of stuff for back training, for example. You can go and do all the cable pull downs, all the fancy stuff with the cuffs as much as you want. You will never grow an ounce of back. So it's become very, very fancy. So training with intensity, I guess, is what you call that. So you need a degree of form and good execution, but not so much like, look, I can put a plate aside and make a barbell row heavy. I could do that at like super slow tempo speed with super squeeze and contractions. I guarantee you never grow any muscle. So there's a fine line without training like an idiot, and also being so accurate with everything that you do. It's somewhere in the middle is a really nice place to be. So training with intensity in kind of goodish form.
Have you, in terms of intensity, do you ever like use a thing like RPE or anything?
No, but for clients, I sometimes do. I mean, we could go off on a tangent with it, really, but
Or
basically,
reps in reserve too. That's
yeah. So I mean, to a certain point, I mean, it's like, look, we know when we should kind of back off. You have to listen to your body a bit more. So you have to sort of learn to auto-regulate. This is why we sort of don't talk about just throwing a bunch of stim down you every single time you go to the gym, because you need to be able to understand when is it good to pull back, when is it good to push on. So like, it's like, you know, I have clients who sort of will want to do a deload every 8 weeks. And I'm like, if you've got your foot on the gas and everything's going really well, why are you backing off? It's like you sort of go until the wheels are coming off, and then you take a step back.
not based on an arbitrary
Exactly. Yeah.
time.
So you can go on all the sciencey stuff, and you know that's some of the problem, is that it's got so much in regards to overcomplication of the process. Very much so with bodybuilding, it's kind of like, you know, eating enough calories and picking up heavy things and putting them down again will grow your muscle tissue. So don't overcomplicate the process. So that's training side. Diet side of things is kind of like, look, if you want to grow, there tends to be a bit of a shift at the moment, and I do agree with it somewhat, that let's say around your 12 to 15% body fat is a really nice place to sit and grow muscle tissue. But people are so worried about putting on body fat that they are then limiting the progress of what they can do because they want to look good all the time. Like for me, when I used to compete back in the day, 2008, 2009, 2010 time, I couldn't give an absolute arse what I looked like 2 weeks after the show. I ate everything in sight. You couldn't tell me otherwise. And all I wanted to do was get big and strong and feel normal again. Now it's a bit different. We're at pro level, and you know, you kind of want to look a bit better, and you spend a lot of time getting that body fat off. But for me, I spent a really good majority of years when I was younger of getting a little heavy in the off season, lifting as much weight as possible, and I was never in a deficit in a day ever.
Yeah.
So you probably need to, if you want to go, how much muscle can I put on? If you keep things within a better range of body composition, so yes, you might become a little bit more not so insulin resistant, and you might find all the sciencey stuff backs you that way. But if you are eating in a deficit half of the time because you are worried about being a little bit out of body composition, I promise you'll limit your amount of mass that you can put.
I feel like that's in the word deficit. If you're in a deficit,
yeah, exactly. It's just like, but there's a case of like, well, I'm trying to hold my body fat here and I'm trying to like main gain with it. It works to a certain point, but I would also kind of segue or caveat that with basically saying like, I'm talking about people who are in there sort of like from like 16 to 25. Yeah. Spend some time eating a bunch of food and lifting heavy things, and you will grow way faster because you're sort of at that prime age of where you're doing that. Your natural testosterone production is probably going to be at its peak. So it's like doing all those things where you're not so worried about kind of like, you know, just trying to maintain abs in the off season. Like it never ever bothered me.
And a lot of that now is, I'm only assuming, but we've got social media now, and you're posting, especially, I could see it maybe if you were actually getting, like you were a paid influencer, or your business was based on your physique.
It's your kind of job, right? That's your job then. It's a different kettle of fish, because you are sort of, you know, you're getting a following based on the way that you look. But like a lot of, I look back in the day with when the fitness models were on the magazine, they looked like that all year round, because at any moment they was like, let's do a cover shoot and put Rob Riches on the front of the cover. Like you can't turn up fat. But his goal wasn't to build as much muscle as possible in that period of time. It was like,
and he looks the same
exactly,
for a long period of time.
Exactly, it just look the same forever. And it's like, this is the problem that you'll get with a lot of natural bodybuilding shows, is that the majority of athletes will take a year off season and they'll come back and it'll look exactly the same. Yeah. So my thing was, there wasn't a year that I didn't improve visually. I might not have gained a ton of tissue on the scale, but I was always a little bit sharper and a little bit bigger, and a little bit sharper, a little bit bigger. And you find this formula where you can get into really nitty gritty levels of body fat, and you're kind of round, full, hard. And yes, like I said, I was probably the same weight on stage for 10 years, But if you look at the progression pictures, they are better every single time because I was never afraid to eat in the office.
It shows you the formula was
So
working.
yeah, so you kind of, you're going to have to, what they say is a famous saying is you can't ride two horses with one ass. So you either going to cut or you're going to basically kind of push calories and try and gain more muscle tissue. So don't be afraid to do that, basically. So not being afraid to eat, training with good intensity. And yes, if you want to be kind of like, a little bit nerdy on that side, like things like, not drinking and going to bed at a reasonable hour. Those things will fast track your progress. Yes, do it with flexibility, but on the same side, it's kind of like, if you want to if I wanted to try and take someone to gain as much muscle as possible, I would be ticking all them little boxes that I could to fast track it. So sleep, food, all that kind of stuff would be the one I want to make the most progress. But you can do it over a longer period and be a little bit more flexible. Yeah. So, you might want to stay up on a Friday night and watch Netflix till 2 a.m. or play PlayStation, whatever. Fine. But it's just like, that's why people kind of get, jealous of the fact that when you do see these kind of like phenoms that come through who are doing everything perfect and they improve so much between shows is because they're probably doing all these things right. Yeah. So,
and they've got the genetics to be able to do it as well.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I said it plays a huge role for sure, but as I said, it definitely.
And what about specifics? So I'm just thinking about when I was a personal trainer, or the questions I would get asked. So it's kind of nice to be able to ask you.
Sure.
It's got even more experience.
So with regards to muscle mass,
I was going to say more in terms of training, and how you have that common thing where people are like, "Oh, I'm going to cut now, so I've got to do higher reps," right? So what's your philosophy when it comes to specifically sets and rep ranges?
So back in the day, I used to follow all these kind of things because it was the go-to.
Yep.
What I very, very quickly learned from the person who coaches me now, actually, is that my training through a off-season and contest prep is exactly the same. Because one thing is good to know is what your level of strength drop-off is during a prep.
Yep.
So what's built the muscle should also hold the muscle. So this doesn't mean that you don't give in at a certain point. If you've dropped 50 pounds in body fat, you're going to lose some weight, right? And you're going to lose some strength in the gym. Just it's going to happen, but it's the degree of drop-off. If someone wants to retire from bodybuilding and downsize, go and train high rep. Because the stimulation that we need for obviously maximizing the amount of muscle fibers is one, training explosively, and especially for a natural, training heavy. When you are assisted and you can throw everything in the kitchen sink at it, which allows you to recover faster and to put on more muscle tissue, as a natural, you don't have those two main things. So if you go and train high rep and you're taking, blasting a load of gear, you're going to grow, right? For a natural, you're kind of like detraining. So it's a way to get smaller.
Go for a run or
something. So yes, you are burning more calories, but you're not stimulating their muscle fibers. You're going to find it has a very different look to your physique. You might get a more streamlined look physique, but you won't have that heaviness and density to the muscle. And that's really clear when you see guys who train super heavy, with good form, good intensity, and they follow a good amount of food on a diet and their output's decent, but they're following a lot of food. It's a completely different look. It's like a round, dense, hard look, not just kind of I said, if you follow high reps, 100%, you will lose strength. If you lose strength, you lose muscle and vice versa.
I think it was a video by the hypertrophy coach and Rough Diesel. They were talking about the same topic, and they just put it simply that if you don't give your body a reason to hang on to the muscle,
of course,
it's going to offload it because it's
perfect.
Just excess energy.
Exactly, because I said it's like we don't use it, we lose it kind of analogy. And it's just really important that, as I said, I've done it. I've been there and done it with right, okay, we're moving on to supersets and circuits. And the times I did that was when I was trying to make weight for them shows back in 2009, 2010. And I was significantly smaller at the end of it. I used to rebound so hard with obviously really good progress. But it's because I changed my training up. So I learned the hard way, and it was right, you train heavy till the very last moment, basically, until you can, maybe till peak week, right, where you're just kind of stimulating the muscle at that point. But as I said, what builds it, you have to do that to keep it. So,
and the other component to that is probably a higher level view in terms of training frequency. Obviously, you got guys like Dorian who always preach like 3 or 4 days a week, and then there's people who do 2 a days.
I mean, training frequency, I'm a little bit, how should we say, varied on. I think it depends on the individual.
Yeah.
I think it's like, training volume, like doing the maximum amount that you can, which you can recover from. I have a bunch of clients who they get on really well with a 4-day week. I very rarely have people who are on a 6-day week. I will always move them to 5 because I feel like you need that difference between the rest and recovery. Because, same again, fortunately I've been there and worn the t-shirt. I used to do double training session days, so AM, PM. 5 to 6 days a week, because I was thinking output. I'd rather be in the gym going to train biceps than I would be going doing cardio. But same again, it became 2 lackluster sessions rather than 1 good one. So it's kind of like little things like that where it's like, okay, you need a good amount of frequency of training those body parts, and especially like weak body parts, but also enough to be able to kind of like then be able to train at a high intensity for a good period of time, like a block of time.
Yeah.
So if you're training 7 days a week, you ain't going to be able to do 7 days a week hard. I don't care who you are, even if someone's taking all the gear as well, like you just can't. You can't train. Yeah, exactly. So it's basically, it's kind of a, it's a no-brainer when you kind of look at it on paper. So, yeah.
And are there typical sort of splits that you opt for? Say if I was a client, I came to you and the scenario is I want to grow, I want to compete, and my legs aren't as good as my upper body.
Yeah.
Would you structure the split differently in order to bias the leg and body part?
Yes and no. Definitely exercise selection.
Yeah.
And looking at what you're doing form and function wise is what I do a lot with clients. It's quite evident in a lot of the time that if I see someone who's kind of like, let's say they've got really good arms and really good shoulders and a really good upper back, but they've got no lower lats, that's more than likely, some of that's genetic, but some of that's muscle inserts, but more than likely it's form and execution on a row.
Shrugging everything up.
So everything's done really high, all the same planar movements. They go with the body strong. So you continue to train in these planar movements where you're just stimulating what you're already good at.
Where the body wants to go.
Exactly, because look, I can move 2 plates if I do the row this way. If I go and do it more for lower lat, then I can only do 1. So, I'm not going to do that.
I'm do 1.
So, exactly. So it's kind of one of those really where I think it's important to, I would prioritize the splits for my bodybuilders, even my lifestyle clients, based on their overall balance of their physique. So that's really important to me, because it's like, look, if someone comes to you because they want a more balanced aesthetic physique and they've got huge legs and a small upper body, we're not doing push-pull leg split.
No.
Because you don't need to train legs twice a week. I've got a young junior client at the moment. He's a teenager actually, and his legs are absolutely ginormous.
Did you post them on your story?
Yeah. They are ginormous. They're like big Rami's legs from the side.
Yeah.
And he like trains balls to the wall on legs all the time. And I'm like, you need to back off. It's like, do you want a more balanced physique, or do you just want to be a bigger version of what you are? So it's like, it's really hard for people to understand that. It's going to be really hard for someone who's like takes pride in the fact they train legs so hard and they're huge. And then you're like, I want you to basically leave some reps in reserve, and I want you to go a bit easier, so that we can let your upper body catch up. So prioritizing muscle groups based on how to balance your physique out, that's important to me. If someone's not so bothered about, if it's a lifestyle client, they're just like, look, I just want to be bigger. Then, in general, I am a bro split guy through and through. I've done push-pull legs for 2 weeks of my life ever. I'll never do it again. For me, I can't get my head around the small amount of volume that I need to do, and what I still then get sore from, which my joints can't recover from, to then go and train that again. And yes, if I stuck with it, I probably could deal with that better, if I would probably recover from it. But the bro split works really well for me. I sort of, train, delts, back, arms, off, and then chest and legs.
Yeah.
So it's like that 5-day split for me works great. I do 4 days in an off season. I tag arms because they're a good body part for me. I tag them in with other stuff. It gives me more opportunity to do work. It comes to prep, it's another day of output. So it's kind of like, for me, it's the good way to do it. But yes, prioritizing your weak muscle groups and what you also enjoy the most.
Yeah.
Because, I've had people who they just like, I do not like training bro split. I am bored as hell doing arms. I want to do push-pull legs. I'm like, cool, no problem. But, as long as that goes well, they have to already have a fairly well-balanced physique. And do the other stuff well. So
one thing that I learned from guys like Hunter Labrada, which I never really thought about in terms of structuring a split, is the push-pull legs. But then, say, my arms need to catch up. So I could do legs, push-pull, have a day off, and then I could do arms. So then the arms getting more frequency in terms of the weight.
Then it becomes a bro split, right?
Yeah.
And it always used to be the running joke of mine. It was like, people would push-pull leg splits. I've got small arms. Because it used to be like tagged on biceps at the end of another session. I was like, your arms are tiny, your legs are massive. Stop training your legs. You know?
Yeah. And right, back to you when you're competing. So the last time you competed, if this is correct, was it 2021?
Yeah, I did Tampa in 2021. Yeah.
And then now, what's on the cards for you? So
I've got a really nice run of shows this year. I mean, I'm in a very fortunate position that, so I work 2 jobs. So I'm a full-time online coach, and I also work for a sales and marketing company. So the sales and marketing company stuff that I do, I basically will do like a 6-week promo at a gym somewhere. It's basically we do from start to finish that process. If we walk into a gym, we do all the sales and marketing, we get the people to then come through the door, we sign them up on a membership, and it's all that for a club to obviously, it's a way for a business to get basically pay no expense out to get a free health campaign done, and then our company takes 50% of the direct income.
Sounds like an interesting way of structuring.
So like if you might pay £30,000 in advertising, which we're paying effectively through the campaign. So you get all that exposure, and Doris is paying £20 a month for a membership. Our company take £10 of that, but you've paid nothing. You've then got an extra 200 members, and obviously then they have got a really nice sort of run to their direct debit run and all that exposure.
And you have the buy-in for also making it successful too, as the people promoting.
Yes, exactly. There's no risk to the club doing it. Basically, that's why it's successful. So it's been running for 25 years now. The company, and I've been a part of it for 12 or so. So basically, I'm in a very fortunate position that I can dip in and out with that. So I have a good understanding with the bosses and stuff. And what I'll do is I'll just not pay myself for the 6 weeks that I'm there until the very end. And then it gives me a pot of money to go and do shows around the US. So
that's very expensive.
Yes, I mean we're talking. If everyone's ever travelled, really, I mean we're talking £300 to £500 a week on a car. Accommodation for where we are in Vegas is a nice little 2-bedroom apartment. Me and my missus sleep in separate rooms because I snore.
Oh yeah, nice.
So there's a good old body of stuff, right? It does have to be a 2-bedroom. Yeah, it's better for our relationship. So. But basically, with things like that, you're talking anywhere between sort of £1,500 to £2,000 a month in rent. Plus, obviously, if you've got bills back home as well, and then obviously then your flights, your travel time, fuels, food, it goes very costly very quickly. So we've got 3 weeks in Vegas to go train for the rest of the prep. The first show is Vancouver. The very next week on the bounce to that is Chicago. So I'm flying from Vancouver on the Tuesday to do the rest of the peak week Chicago. Then I've got 2 weeks off and it's Tampa, and then 2 weeks off and then it's Texas.
Oh, have you ever done so many shows so close together?
Not that close.
Yeah.
Not that close. So, but once I'm in shape, I'm in shape. Like it's quite well to hold that condition.
And would you, in terms of carb loading for your show, would you do less for each one?
No, so I'll peak for the first one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's obviously, if everyone's ever seen the carb loads that I do, it's like, we went to Whole Foods in Miami one year, and we obviously, Whole Foods is quite expensive, right?
Yeah, it is. It's the bougie
I spent
supermarket.
like £100 on potatoes for 2 days. So it's
a lot of
like
potatoes.
if no one's ever bought one of them sacks of potatoes from the shop, which are about this high off the floor, I'll do one of those over a 2.5 day period. So it's like 10, 20 kilos of potatoes.
How are you eating those?
Just like mash or boiled.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Tasty.
So yeah.
No salt?
No, we pull it.
Oh yeah.
So we pull it out towards the show, which you can get into it as well. But
yeah.
So basically, it's every hour on the hour from 5 in the morning till 12 o'clock at night is potato build to the carb loads. It's a very hard, aggressive way to carb load. I don't carb load a lot of my clients this way because it's horrible. It's like 12 litres of water and a stupid amount of potatoes per day. We're talking 400 or 500 grams of potato in it. So half a kilo of potato.
Digestion must be pretty good to
It
be
is,
able to...
but then you also need to be eating like this. Not like quite like that, but I mean, I said I'm still eating, carbs in every single meal, which is either white potato or sweet potato. So when you then come around to doing your carbs loads like that, it's
not
it's
a different
it is a way to
stimulus.
do it. Yeah. So you and obviously your body's like a furnace at that end of prep as well. I mean, it's like, don't get me wrong, you're still a bit bloated, and obviously drinking all the water and stuff on top. It's tough. It's a really tough day because you go from 50 gram of carbs on the Wednesday to then like 1,400 on the first loading day.
I think the irony is that for so long you've been in this hard deficit.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait, this is hard now.
You don't load with any protein.
Yeah.
So the protein's going to slow the absorption of the carb down. So basically you are literally just eating a skinless 500 gram white potato every hour of the day pretty much. It comes down as the day goes on, right? But you're talking it's like 50 meals of white potato. So I'm sure people will love to hear this. They're quite fun to watch, but it said like, at that point in prep, you're just obviously flying through it. But that's like a day one show. Anyway, the point was of this conversation is that the loading would take place over depletion for 3 or 4 days, a loading for 2 or 3 days. But then I have to then put my body through that. It's not wise to then do it again the week after. So I will just cruise in for Chicago, where I'll probably just maintenance for the first few days, reintroduce some salt back to the diet, things like that. And you rebound hard when you take salt out and put it back in. Yeah. Like you can be horrific.
Sucks everything out. Yeah.
I look like the day after I did Tampa last year, I looked like I was 6 weeks out the day after the show. And just so cloudy. And I literally looked like I'd put like 10 pounds of body fat on. I'd only gained like 2 pounds.
It's just like water retention.
And then within 3 days it's back out once your body regulates itself properly again. But then basically, so I don't get a cheat meal after the show. Unfortunately, I won't get one till the end of August. And I've already been on prep 18 weeks. So
it's a journey.
So it's fun. So once I've done that, and then obviously I'll be able to then peak properly again. I'll be able to deplete load for Tampa and for Texas. Yeah. So it would probably be a bit of an easier week for me in Chicago, not having to deplete and load like that. But I expect I'm still going to be eating a decent amount, depending on how I look, the few days before or whatever. So
yeah, well, it sounds like you certainly have an interesting journey ahead.
Yeah, it's all funny, It's I say the same again. I love all that side of things. It's like, I did a carb loading for the Tampa show. I was in Dubai at the time, and I was walking down the road in Dubai. It was 50 degrees at the time, so it was ridiculous, right? So I was doing like a little shorts and vest, as you do, and I was trying to return this key to someone, and I was at the very last day, the very end of the day of the first day of carb loads. We're talking 1,400 grams of carbs. Yeah. And people were staring at me walking down the street, and I was thinking, what was I staring at me for? And then when I got into the lift, when I got in to take this key back up, it looked like a cartoon. I was like, I've never seen my body look like that. It looked like someone had pumped me up with a balloon. It was just like you've gone from really flat to really full. Everything was like veiny tight and just looked like so round. I was like, I've literally never looked like that in my life.
So you jump into a sauna before you...
Like, what's doing? Like, it just looks so freaky, obviously, being that lead and to do that. And I said, you get a really nice super compensation when you do that. But yeah, so it works very, very well, but it's very, very hard to get right.
Yeah,
so,
and if people want to follow your journey to these shows, where is the best place for people to find?
Instagram, and I did try a little bit of YouTube stuff at one point, but it's the time and effort and for the return.
I feel like you speak really well, though.
Oh,
you do quite well in long form content.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I did a lot of walk and talks and stuff where I went away in Dubai.
Yeah.
I don't do it in the UK because no one watches them because it's fucking boring here. Whereas we've got all the yachts and the nice stuff going on in Dubai. People are just like, just tune in to see what you do. So most of the time, Instagram is really good. I don't really post on Facebook, so it's really the kind of one place I really post. And I post most days, post my training stuff and the food side. I'm definitely going to document a few of the carb loads and stuff like that because it's all fun to see.
I'd personally be very interested to see
that's
that.
it, yeah. But meal 1, potato. Meal 15, potato. So yeah, it's like what I love about it, it's like the sheer broness of it all as well. Yeah. Like it's so old school, so bro.
And when you don't compete, it's so hard to understand.
Oh yeah, it's terrible.
So weird.
You do what?
Yeah, and that's so bad for your body.
How much potato? What? Sorry, you can't have their numbers right. You're like, no. I had a guy who phoned me up. after the Two Bros show, and he was like, "Oh, I'm also a very high carb dieter like you." He said, "I've done 500 grams of potato for this carb load."
Oh, yeah.
I said, 500 grams of potato. I said, "Do you mean potato or 500 grams of carbs?" He went, "No, 500 grams of potato." I said, "I've done 500 grams of potato every hour for 14 hours."
That's a meal.
I said, "You've done 50 carbs, or you've done 100 carbs." I was like, "You're not even close." He's like, "Oh, like I understand where I'm going wrong now." So it kind of puts into perspective of like what you do is mental. When you think about it like that, but it's a set. I love it all. It's very broy, but it's like all this stuff is like tried and tested over years.
Exactly.
It really is, and it's you want to know what you're doing. I said like I wouldn't put a lot of my clients through them kind of loads. It would be more conservative. Like you pull some carbs out at the start of the week, you replace them over a 2-day period toward the end of the week. Or you might do a triple day carb load, a double day carb load, and then a single day carb load. So it's a very much easier approach with the normal foods that are eaten with a slightly faster absorbing and slightly slower absorbing. So it's a little bit kind of easier on the body. But like if you are in like true ready stage condition, you can feed the body like crazy after a depletion, and you just get better and better and better. And it take you a good few days to spill. I mean, I have spilled for shows before. But no, if you've got someone who's on the borderline of being ready and you feed them 1,000 grams of carbs a day, they will look terrible. 100%. So it's all relative to where you are conditioning wise,
And maybe before we wrap it up, one last question for you, seeing as we're already on the same vein anyway. If people are listening and they're considering competing, what are a few pieces of advice that you would give them? Maybe things that you wish you knew before you competed.
Hire a coach this day and age. I mean, I kind of had to do it the hard way of like finding all the mistakes of first myself. And I've even had people who've like said I've come on board. They're like, actually, I just want to find out these mistakes for myself. I'm like, why? I can fast track you to like so you don't have to do all this stuff. And I don't mean like I'm plugging my coach in here. It's like, no, find a coach you can relate well with. Who knows the ins and outs of bodybuilding side of things. Not maybe a lifestyle coach, because it is a little bit more niche if you're going to bodybuild specifically. If you're just trying to lose weight for a wedding or a photo shoot, great. Like flexible dieting works really, really well. If you are wanting to do like a proper bodybuilding show where you're trying to get to like sub 5% body fat, hire someone who's done bodybuilding and got into decent nick themselves, or at least knows how to do it with other clients. So look at the track record, that kind of stuff, and spend the money on a good coach. You don't need to be out stupid, like, remortgage your house to get a coach. But you do get a little bit of what you pay for in the industry with coaching, I think. There's a few idiots out there for sure. Absolutely. But, go to someone who's tried and tested, who's maybe competed themselves a few times before. It's know that you're going to kind of know what they're doing. Yeah. So, that's what I'd say.
Anything else?
What was the question again? Just remind me.
Advice if you're wanting to compete. The first thing, I feel like that was one good one though. Yeah, that's get a coach.
Okay, so get a coach is the first one. 2, do it for the right reasons. Yeah. Like do it because it's something that you really want to be able to have some sort of self-accomplishment and focus. And the one thing I will say to you, it will transform your intensity and your focus towards weight training more so than any other thing you can do. As much as I don't like to admit it, I am a better bodybuilder on prep. Yeah. I'm good in the off season, probably very good. But it's that extra little bit of oomph that you need to basically to kind of go like, look, I'm going to tick every single box. I'm going to do everything perfect. And people find that really hard to translate that back to an off season. And when you find that formula of how to take that with you in the off season, you make really, really good progress. So kind of say, do it for the right reasons. Or what else?
Maybe one more.
Just rephrase the question again for me. So,
if I was a beginner wanting to compete, what are some pieces of advice you'd give me?
And unfortunately, there's no cutting corners.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's really as hard as it sounds. Yeah. Easier isn't always better. That's the one big thing. I've definitely had this conversation with clients before. It's like, I can use packet microwave rice. It's the same carbs. I'm like, look, when you get data of people who do these little food swaps and things like that, and I don't know the science behind it, but whether it be just kind of anecdotal evidence, if 5 people have moved to packet rice and all the preservatives and stuff they put in to keep that on the shelf for a period of time, and can't understand why they were holding so much water all the time. It's because that easier option isn't a better option for you. So it's like little things of like, oh, well, I've read this article and it just says this. It's like, oh, you know what, it doesn't matter when I do my cardio. It's like, look, fasted cardio has been getting people in shape for years and years and years to come. So it's like, basically do what your coach tells you, but also like don't try to find an easier way to do
any
something.
loopholes or anything along the way.
Because you know, it might be like my whole thing at the moment as well is cooked versus raw weight food.
Oh, yeah. Well, where do you stand?
So I'm a raw
intrigued.
weight guy, right?
Oh, yeah.
So like cooked weight, right? It works, okay? Like yes, to a certain point. If you're a guy getting ready for a photo shoot, fine.
Yeah.
If you are elite level bodybuilder, if I have a 200 gram piece of fillet steak and I cook that in the pan and it's just medium rare, nice, right? That same weight of that steak is going to be different if I cook it for 24 hours in the oven.
Isn't that why it's better to measure it cooked though?
No, so because then you get more food, right? Yeah, exactly. So you actually are not getting the actual true amount of what it actually is. So yes, a client can go, well, like, look, it's really easy for me just to like, look, don't get me wrong. If you are cooking exactly the same method for the exact same of time, fine.
So yeah.
But like, look,
controlling the variables.
Yeah, exactly. So like, if I cook rice one day and I go, I'm going to eat 200 grams of cooked rice, but I don't use the same water measurement each time I do it. So one day I have my rice a bit stickier, a bit more water in it. That rice isn't going to be 200 grams cooked. It's not the same carb value as it was previously. Sure. So it's like, look, you can still batch food, your food prep. So like, you know, I might cook 5 meals of 100 grams of chicken of 500 grams, and then I cook it all in a pan, and then I reweigh it and divide it by 5 at the end. It's just a better way of doing it, where it's more accurate. So, you know, can we get a result from doing it the other way? Absolutely. Yeah. When we're trying to, you know, look at every single variable of kind of like, is this the actual amount of what I'm putting in? Because what you'll do when you're hungry, as you said before, it's like, look, I've got this 200 gram piece of steak, but if I cook it for 8 hours, I can eat double.
Yeah.
I've got more food, but it's not the same calories.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, look, that's my cooked weight, as I've just got more, you know, if it's more dried out, I've got more of it. You know, it's just like, as I said, not trying to find, say, the loopholes and not trying to make things easier on yourself, because it is not an easy sport. No. It's probably one of the hardest sports out there because it's so 24/7.
Especially the dieting aspect of it.
Exactly.
You just can't get
water consumption, training, cardio. It's like, you know, it's on the food prep alone. It's just obviously, it's non-stop. Yeah. I mean, I cook every day, but I've got some clients who cook for 5 hours on a Saturday for the whole week, you know. Yeah. You bag it all up, freeze it up. It's just like, it's never ending, right? But as I said, it's like every single time that I have tried to make a little cut corner, or I'll just do 15 minutes of cardio rather than the 20 I'm supposed to do, is always a time I get my ass handed to me in a show, because I've just basically I didn't do it as well as I could have done. Yeah. So it's kind of, what do they say, sort of, you know, don't be upset with the results you didn't get for the work you didn't do.
Exactly.
So, you know.
Well, I think that's us, man. I want to say again, I really appreciate you coming on.
No worries. The problem is I can talk for hours about this.
I feel like we can keep going down rabbit holes, but I'm looking at our time. But I think... No, that was really awesome, man. And people are going to get a lot of value out of that. Cool. And we mentioned your Instagram, but we didn't mention the Instagram handle. Was it?
Okay, it's Bob Waterhouse 86. Yep. It started, well, obviously everyone knows me as Robert or Rob. Yeah. But a few people were calling me Bob back in the day, and then everyone in the bodybuilding world knows me as Bob. Yeah. So it's just...
Including me, I thought you were just Bob. I was interested. I found it interesting when you got introduced as Robert. I was like, oh, yeah.
That's it, yeah. But yeah, thanks so much for having me, mate. As I say, I could talk about this stuff all day and all night. It's always an exciting subject for me. And same goes over just if people do want to reach out for coaching side, then get me on Instagram. Yeah. I don't think the link tree is up and running at the moment, so something I'll probably just sort it out. But DM. Yeah, exactly. Send me a DM. I'm always pretty good with responses on that stuff. So
easy. Thanks, man.
All right, no worries.